Richard Ramirez, one of the bloodiest serial killers in 1980s America. Richard Ramirez was one of the most brutal serial killers in America during the 1980s. He was responsible for at least 43 crimes. He worshipped Satan, evaded justice for more than a year, and after being imprisoned, unexpectedly gained a following of admirers. On an April day in 1984, 9-year-old May Leung from San Francisco was playing with her younger brother near their home. At one point, the children lost a $1 bill, and May went off to look for it. On the way, she met a young man with chestnut, slightly curly hair and a kind smile. The stranger offered to help her search, and May agreed. A few minutes later, they ended up in the dark basement of the building where May lived. There, the man raped and stabbed her before strangling her. Half an hour later, her brother found May's body hanging from a pipe. When we saw the body, it looked like a crucifixion. She was hanging with her head and chin lowered, recalled police officer Ronald Schneider. May became the first known victim of Richard Ramirez, whom the media would later call the Night Stalker. Her death marked the beginning of a killing spree that would terrorize the West Coast for over a year. Richard Ramirez was born in 1960 in El Paso, a city near the Mexican border. He was the fifth child in a family of Mexican immigrants, Mercedes and Julian Ramirez. His father had served in the Mexican army and, after moving to the U.S., worked for the railroad. His mother worked in a shoe factory, where she was regularly exposed to toxic chemical fumes, unknown at the time to cause serious health issues. All of Richard's siblings were born with various congenital defects, from breathing difficulties to bone deformities. One of his brothers, Reuben, was left permanently disabled. Some researchers have suggested that the health problems among locals were linked to radioactive fallout from nuclear tests conducted in nearby New Mexico. Because both parents worked long hours, Richard was often left unsupervised and got into frequent trouble. When he was 2, a dresser fell on his head while he was reaching for a radio, requiring 30 stitches and resulting in a concussion. 3 years later, he was hit by a swing. In 5th grade, he began having seizures and was diagnosed with epilepsy. Richard's relationship with his family was tense. His father was harsh and often beat his children for even minor misbehavior. Although he had 4 older siblings, Richard spent most of his time with his cousin Miguel, a Vietnam War veteran. Miguel loved telling stories about raping and killing local women and even showed Richard Polaroid photos of their corpses. Later, Ramirez admitted that the sight of dead bodies sexually aroused him. He knew it was wrong, but was afraid to say anything for fear of exposing his cousin. Miguel's wife, Jessie, disapproved of her husband's influence on the boy. She wanted him to get a job, and their constant arguments escalated until one day, during a fight, Miguel pulled out a revolver and shot Jessie in the head, right in front of Richard and their children. Miguel was arrested and sentenced to 7 years in prison. Some reports claim he was committed to a psychiatric hospital instead. Ramirez would later say this was the moment he became obsessed with death and killing. As a teenager, he sniffed glue, smoked marijuana, slept in cemeteries, and stole from classmates. His father responded with violent beatings. Once, Julian even chained Richard to a cross in a cemetery overnight as punishment. At 15, Ramirez got a job at a Holiday Inn, where he spied on guests through curtains and broke into their rooms at night to steal valuables. Once, he hid in a closet while a woman was showering and tried to rape her, but her husband walked in. Ramirez was arrested, but the charges were dropped when the couple refused to return to El Paso to testify. He was later arrested several times for petty crimes and drug possession. In 1982, he received a suspended 50-day sentence and a $115 fine for marijuana possession. At 18, Richard left El Paso for Los Angeles. There, he began using cocaine heavily and stealing cars to explore the city's outskirts. He also became fascinated by Anton LaVey, founder of the Church of Satan, and claimed to serve the devil. Once, he stole a car just to attend a satanic ritual in San Francisco. Afterward, he called his mother and said, "Satan touched me." After another arrest for auto theft, Ramirez spent several months in jail. Upon release, he lost contact with his family and lived alone in cheap motels, surviving on drugs and stolen goods. After Mei Lung's murder, his next victim was 79-year-old Jenny Venkow, killed on June 28, 1984. Ramirez entered her home through an open window and stabbed her repeatedly in the head, neck, and chest, nearly decapitating her. He again escaped capture. On March 17, 1985, investigator Gil Carrillo received a call about another murder. The body of 34-year-old Dale Okazaki, shot in the head in her kitchen. Moments earlier, her roommate Maria Hernandez had encountered Ramirez in the garage. He fired at her, but the bullet ricocheted off her car keys, sparing her life. After killing Dale, Ramirez fled and soon shot another woman, 30-year-old Tsai Lian Yu. Both were killed with a .22 caliber pistol, but police couldn't yet connect the crimes. 10 days later in Whittier, a couple, Vincent and Maxine Zazzara, were found brutally murdered. Ramirez shot Vincent in the head, then mutilated Maxine's body, gouged out her eyes, and took them as trophies. He stole jewelry worth over $40,000. Investigators found a shoe print at the scene, the first solid lead. Meanwhile, reports of child abductions rose sharply. One of Ramirez's child victims, 6-year-old Anastasia Hornanes, later recalled how he broke into her room, kidnapped her, and assaulted her for hours before dropping her off at a gas station and telling her to call 911. Carrillo began to suspect they were dealing with a serial killer, a claim his colleagues initially mocked. On July 5, 1985, Ramirez attacked 16-year-old Whitney Bennett, beating and strangling her with a telephone cord until sparks flew from the wire. Believing Jesus had intervened, he fled. Whitney survived, receiving 478 stitches. The shoe print from his Avia sneakers was found again. This rare Avia model, size 11, black, would later tie him to multiple murder scenes, the only pair sold in Los Angeles. Despite repeated close calls, coordination failures between police jurisdictions slowed the investigation. At one point, Ramirez was even stopped for a traffic violation but escaped before his identity was confirmed. Later, he fled to San Francisco, where he shot Peter and Barbara Pan in their home, leaving behind satanic symbols. The city's mayor, Dianne Feinstein, announced a $10,000 reward, but during her press conference, she publicly revealed details about the shoe prints and weapon caliber, tipping Ramirez off. He destroyed key evidence and fled back to Los Angeles. On August 24, 1985, Ramirez raped a woman and shot her boyfriend, identifying himself as the Night Stalker. The same day, teenager James Ramiro, delivering newspapers, noticed a suspicious orange Toyota and reported part of the license plate to police. The car was found later that day with fingerprints on the rearview mirror. In San Francisco, police identified Ramirez after linking him to a stolen bracelet. When confronted, the thief named Richard Ramirez as the seller. On August 31, 1985, police released Ramirez's name and photo to the public. That morning, unaware of the news, he returned to Los Angeles by bus and immediately saw his own face on the front pages. Panicking, he tried to flee, but was recognized by passengers. Locals chased him down and beat him until police arrived. Crowds cheered outside the station where Ramirez was held. Los Angeles had finally caught the Night Stalker. According to prosecutor Alan Yochison, Ramirez relished the attention and played to the crowd. At an October 1985 court hearing, he arrived with a pentagram drawn on his palm, declaring, "Hail Satan." While awaiting trial, he began receiving letters from female admirers, some sending nude photos or tattooing satanic symbols in his honor. One of them, 41-year-old journalist Doreen Leo, eventually married him in prison. In 1989, Ramirez was convicted of 43 crimes, including 13 murders, numerous rapes, and robberies. On November 7, 1989, he was sentenced to death in the gas chamber. Smiling, he said he would not appeal the verdict. No big deal. Death always comes with the territory. Hail Satan. His case generated over 48,000 pages of court records, one of the largest in U.S. history. Richard Ramirez, the Night Stalker, died of B-cell lymphoma on June 7, 2013, at the age of 53, after nearly 24 years on death row.